So now going to introduce onto the stage Professor Paul Longley. Paul is Professor of GIS at UCL. He's written 16 books, including co-authoring the best-selling GIS and science book, and he works very closely with Keith on the work that Fiona's just mentioned about retail research and data initiative. Now, Paul's going to be the ringmaster. Not sure what a ringmaster is in this instance, but I'm going to find out, of the students presenting back the work that they've been doing over the summer. So over to Paul.
Thanks very much, Mike, and it's lovely to be here once again. As some of you will be aware, I've worked with Keith and the Demographic User Group on an ad hoc basis, really, over recent years. And one of the ways in which we've developed formative collaborations has been in developing master's projects, which shared responsibility between academic supervisors and people that were represented in Keith's Demographic Users Group. And so, of course, we were delighted to have the opportunity really to move this sort of one step forward through the ESRC Retail Research Navigator scheme with our own aspect of it, looking at retail research and data. And fundamental to this was really two premises. I think the first is that this kind of dialogue between the academic and the retail sector is not something that you can just turn on and off like a tap. It's something that has to be developed, nurtured, and really sort of grow from the bottom up. And our previous experience on looking at shared masters projects seemed to produce some kind of vehicle for that. And that was also consistent with the second consideration, that it makes comparatively little sense, particularly in these sort of austere times, to go and look for very generous amounts of co-funding when the case for this kind of collaboration and its ability to deliver results as well as academic input is as yet unproven. And so basically, so sometime last year, Keith got on the phone to his contacts in the Demographic Users Group and also sort of more widely. And the outcome of that was around about 20 or so topics that you can see that we put on Fiona's area of the ESRC website, which address a lot of the topics that we've heard discussed today, sort of in passing and so forth, but very much really sort of from a small is beautiful type perspective, the notion that small things might develop into broader projects, but nonetheless, in so doing, also help the people who were going to undertake the research. And so Keith was responsible in terms of day-to-day administration with liaising between the various institutions, and we have a wide range of university institutions and students from economics, from business studies, from planning, from geography, sort of a range of social sciences. And each of them, as I say, sort of has ended up developing a project. So, Chairman are sort of polite and invite questions. Last week at UCL, we have a similar sort of introduction to our new, sort of research students. And the difference between a chairman and a ringmaster is when a sort of meandering Italian student stands up to give his 3-minute presentation and starts to reflect on the ontology and epistemology of his life, and things don't move very quickly. A ringmaster starts with spontaneous applause, okay? So if anyone runs over seriously, you're going to collaborate with me and in terms of drowning spontaneous applause, and the person will be removed from the podium. So each of we're delighted that 12 of the 16 completed projects are represented here today, most all by the students themselves, but we've also got one or two stand-ins from the academic supervisors. For the information of those that are about to give their 3-minute talks, they're arranged alphabetically by retailer, and then within that, where a retailer has sponsored more than one project by family name of the student who was slated to do the presentations. So, first up, it's Harman. So, Harman worked with Barclays on, and he comes from a business studies background.
Yeah, thank you. So just to begin with, I'm Harman. So a bit about myself. Well, for the next 3 to 4 minutes or so, I'm going to be summarising the key features of my project. And a bit about myself. I've just finished my Masters in Economics from the University of Warwick. Previous work experience includes, last summer I interned at Deutsche Bank within the Global Markets Division. So just moving forward, I worked in collaboration with Barclays Bank, and we researched and investigated how changes in consumer behaviour are impacting the banking provision. And so as we know, the role of the high street is changing, so with pressure from out-of-town shopping malls, retail centres and parks to online delivery services, that we as consumers have changed the way we interact with our banks to carry out banking services. And I think that better understanding by the banks on the impact of these changes and the future directions that they're going to take will help banks to make better informed decisions on which locations should be prioritised for branch investment. And, in order to answer the question, the purpose of the research initially was to model and determine which factors affect market share at a postal sector level in the area of Nottingham. And this required analysing cross-sectional data, which was given to me by in-house at Barclays Bank, specifically within the customer network strategy team. And, in order to estimate which factors affect market share, I actually developed a structural model of demand that allows not only for changes observed in the market share in Nottingham, but also in service characteristics such as the size of the network and the geographical diversification. The results from the analysis especially provides insight not only on how consumer behaviour and how they rank certain characteristics which affect market share, but the scope of the research suggests that other banks can determine which factors are important as well, because we found that consumers are found to respond to not only to competitive presence but also several bank attributes as well. I mean, for example, a significant variable which was the square feet, the size of the branch in terms of square feet, the number of ATMs within a 1 to 5 mile radius, and the distance of retail centres within a 1 to 5 mile radius. And why the research is useful to Barclays is that it estimates the estimates of consumer preferences across bank characteristics can be used to analyse the effects of potential mergers. So without giving too much away, but if a competitor moves closer to Barclays by 1%, this leads to a fall of 0.3 to 0.4% in market share at the postal sector level. But if you have a look at the direction of the way, is that if Barclays was to merge, not merge, but acquire a branch where a competitor used to be, would actually have a positive impact on the market share. And I think that what my project really tries to emphasise is that despite all the changes in the industry and the fears of some technological progress, such as online delivery services and the internet, that could have harmful effects on the high street, is that the results suggest that consumers actually benefit from branching, and a lot of literature around the US following deregulation in the late 90s suggests that consumers do benefit from having a local bank branch within their high street at commutable distance. And I think I'm going to leave it there, but I'd encourage everyone to look at my poster and ask me some interesting questions. Thanks for listening.
Very good. Next, Shazar Anwar can't be here this afternoon. A student of business from the Kingston Business School, but we're very pleased that Mark Passera from the Kingston Business School has come along to fill that place.
Hello, apologies from Anwar. One of the problems that Anwar has is that his master's dissertation is not due for another couple of weeks. So if you're waiting for some kind of insight or some illumination into home delivery, you'll have to get in touch in about another 3 weeks' time. Okay, first thing, the project was really based along the ideas or the problems with boots and home delivery. So the desk research that Anwar carried out was highlighting and identifying barriers. These barriers could be with, let's say, the Boots website, it could be with home delivery or other options. So the initial research, the quantitative that was carried out with Boots, focused on things like awareness, ease, barriers and inhibitions. From this point, Anwar then, and he's in the process of doing this now, is carrying out in-depth interviews by looking at delivery options, by trying to ascertain and try to determine exactly what is it that people are looking for, and then also to see whether or not there's any variations in terms of some of the traditional demographics and whether these are regional and so forth. Another interesting problem that was thrown up with the desk research was, is Boots going to have a problem with home delivery, not because of home delivery, but because of what Boots the brand stands for? So will people not shop at Boots online because of the categories? Or do they just need to be made aware of the different options, the different, let's say, opportunities that are available? So to kind of like try to sum up, one of the wider themes at the very, very bottom of this slide is to also, Anwar wanted to highlight best practice. The desk research was quite wide and wanted to look at other categories, other industries, and also other countries as well. So the conclusion would be, one would think that on the basis of a triangular approach to the research, what kind of insights can be thrown up that Boots could then act on, and what, let's say, what possible barriers could there be in terms of customer complaints as well, because that was another area that Anwar was going to investigate through the in-depth interviews. Thank you very much for your time.
Very good. Next, it's Matt, who did the MSc in GIS or something similar to that at Southampton University.
Right. Yes, hello, my name is Matthew Pratt. I did an MSc at the University of Southampton. I've managed to change Boots' title, Defining Retail Connotations, this quite long-winded one. I looked at an innovative approach to defining retail connotations to the adaptation of the travel to work area algorithm. Okay, so the aim of my project was to apply a rules-based approach to zone design, mapping Boots customer flow data from loyalty cards in producing their retail connotations. What is a retail connovation? They're zones of one or multiple stores and they act as discrete shopping entities, very similar to store catchments. The benefits of retail conurbations is that they can aid in a lot of local location decisions, such as evaluating overall performance, stores in a network rather than just evaluating them individually. They can indicate competitor presence and guide decisions for the opening and closing of stores. Current methods of delineation, generally gravity modelling or a zones of dominance approach. Quite a lot of retailers rely on CASI for their retail conurbations. These are produced from banking data, things like transactions and stuff. And yeah, many retailers are limited by the data accessible, which is why they rely on CASI. Okay, so what's the TTWA algorithm? It's a rules-based algorithm used to design zones from flows. It optimizes to self-containment, So, for example, high self-containment means that very few flows cross boundaries with other retail conurbations. Currently, it's used in many countries to define travel-to-work areas. It's used to evaluate things like employment, generally used by governments, and it's recognised as a very robust method and one of the most popular methods. Applying it to retail conurbations based on, as I say, loyalty card data. I implemented it through database programming in Microsoft Access and Visual Basic, and I applied it to Newcastle and the surrounding area, all of Northern Ireland and Wales. I'll try and pick up the pace a bit. This is Northern Ireland. On the left, you can see their current boots conurbations, and on the right, ones from using the TTWA algorithm. You can see that as a result of the zone of dominance approach, you've got these data gaps. If you were to not have the data gaps, you'd end up with an overlapping zonal geography as a limitation of the approach. Here you've got no data gaps, you've got higher self-containment because that's what the algorithm is based on, and you've got slight fragmentation. You can see tiny little points here and here as there's no continuity constraint, but whether this is a problem or not is up to you to decide. They could indicate things like competitor presence and maybe some key demographics in those regions. So to conclude, retail conurbations are widely used. It's important, therefore, to increase their accuracy. Retailers currently use fairly simplistic methods to design their conurbations, or they rely on CASI. The results from this method shows that you can make the areas tessellate perfectly, you can have full scene coverage, and you can have a higher self-containment of the flows. The conurbations show strong agreement as well with Boots retail hierarchy conveyed in their spider diagrams. I haven't got time to touch on that. Retailers can improve their conurbations by using their own data and implementing this more sophisticated approach. And final words, Boots have invested quite a lot on their data quality for their customer flow metrics and loyalty cards. This enables them to use a more sophisticated method. Quite a few other retailers haven't invested in a flow matrix quite the same way, but it's important to do so to be able to use these more sophisticated methods. And that's it.
Very good. It's Alistair next. Alistair Leake, who worked with Camelot.
Hello, so I'm Alistair. I've just completed a Master of Research at UCL in the Centre for Advanced Analysis. And for my project, I teamed up with Camelot to look at wealth and deprivation in the United Kingdom and to develop a consistent indicator across all 4 administrations. So the challenge that a lot of you might be familiar with is that though quite detailed demographic classifications exist for the UK, each administration has got slightly different methodologies, sort of different data, or slightly different data sources, and they've got different sort of publication schedules, which raises challenges when you're looking at sort of creating a national product or sort of analysing national trends. And in addition, say you're using the IMD or one of the other administration equivalents, you haven't necessarily got sufficiently long-term data to match with your own data to perform a complete analysis. So, in the perfect world, what would the solution be, or my perfect world anyway, would be a hybrid indicator which brought together the strengths and the sort of consistent elements of the existing deprivation measures, which gives you a tool that you could already fairly familiar with through existing work with the deprivation indices, but also allows you to carry out your national indicators. And hopefully using sort of free and open source software and open data so that it doesn't matter how much you can afford when you're buying your demographic classification, you can customise it to your own need and you're not limited in that sense. Just roughly, the method involved taking the 4 existing deprivation measures for 4 administrations and looking for shared ground between them, not even necessarily by domain, just by indicator because of different classification schemes into domains. A lot of things are shared that you might not realise. And once that was completed, bringing together or creating weightings based on the relative populations of each administration so that you get a reasonably fair representation. And that was put together so it's into an employment and income domain sort of predominantly at the moment. In order to test the measure, the testing was carried out on an administration by administration basis using the appropriate IMD to the year that my measure was created and using Pearson's R. And in all 4 cases, the significance was about 0.93 or above. So it's fairly representative in most areas. In addition, it's produced an open methodology which is in some ways quite a lot simpler than the existing deprivation measures. It's partly due to the fact that many indicators aren't necessarily available in each administration or at least in a consistent format. And some of the, though that's maybe a downside for accuracy on the indicator level, by having a simpler methodology that doesn't rely on census data, you've got a lot more freedom in how you're not sort of restricted by annual classifications. You might want to do a longer term, or you might want to do seasonal analysis, which gives you more opportunities in, say, tourism or leisure, where you've got sort of seasonal migrations. I'd just like to finish off by thanking Dr. Cheshire of CASA, who's my supervisor at the RCC, and Gordon from Camelot Group. And I'll be at the poster thing, so you can ask questions.
Next, it's Remy Martins-Tonks, who worked with the cooperative group. 2 quick points about the cooperative group. The first is that they actually sponsored 2 of the projects here. The second was a lady called Catherine Ryan, who's got a job, a house, a car, this, that and the other, and is far too busy to come to events like this. But well done to Catherine for an excellent piece of work on looking at geographic variation in what we mean by shopping baskets within the co-op's portfolio. And Catherine's poster is outside in the exhibition. And the second comment, which emphasises something that Fiona was saying, is the cooperative group have taken the next step, if you like, moving beyond these master's dissertations. In the wake of the master's dissertations, they're co-sponsoring a PhD award in one of the ESRC funded doctoral training centres in the coming year. So some sort of example of how this sort of grassroots strategy feeds forward. But aside from all that, over to you, Remy.
Good afternoon. So I've worked with the cooperative food, as Paul just said. And what I looked at, the short title is competitive to evaluation. You can ask me for the long title later if you want. Essentially, these are my main research questions, and I was basically looking at what happens when a new store opens up near an existing co-op store, and essentially how that effects vary between different retailers. So does, say, a Tesco Express have more of a negative impact than, say, a Sainsbury's local or a Morrison's or a discounter store? And in addition to that, I then extended that and then looked at how these effects of these negative effects that different stores opening near a co-op store varied according to different demographics, and I used the mosaic classification level to do that. And then finally, I looked at how different stores affected different product categories, so how a store opening affected, say, kiosk goods in a co-op store or bakery goods. The methodology that I used, my sample contained 194 impacted co-op stores, so not exactly big data, although I guess it does sort of cover the retail issues side of things. And that sample ran from the start of 2010 to mid-2012. With this data, I then specified a statistical or econometric model, whichever sort of term you want to use. And that essentially had a dependent variable as co-op store sales per square foot, and then I controlled for things like the competitor store size, the demographics within the area, how far that store was located, and of course the retail fascia. Once I specified the model, I then estimated it using 3 different econometric techniques. If you want to sort of go into more detail about the econometrics, I'd be happy to discuss that afterwards, like by my poster. And the actual dissertation that I submitted to Warwick looked in detail about these different techniques and which one was the most suitable to sort of come across the issues of selection bias, which is what David talked about earlier. And finally, my overall results, I can't name specific retailers for confidentiality reasons, but I found that the effects varied significantly between retailers, and that depending on which retailer located in their co-op store, the predicted loss in revenue varied from -4 to -41% in terms of sales. Thanks for listening.
Very good.